Good evening. Well, it has been, first I'll say thank you all for coming out this evening. I know it's not fun to come out in the dark of night this time of year, and it's been pretty cold, but at least we're not all slipping on ice and having those fun times. So thank you for taking the time. It's been a long time getting here. Although the reality is that we are not even 2 years out from when we received the funding. 2 years will be in April. So even though this has lived up to what we said from day one, which was that this would be a extremely challenging corridor for a whole range of reasons, technical and other issues. We're here tonight, and very good news that we're moving into construction. So it's all going to now happen pretty quickly. Now that we've been through all the engineering and technical challenges, legal challenge, all of that pieces, we're ready to really rock and roll. And I want to thank, we may need some new batteries in this, Sean. I don't know if this is our, there it goes. Big part of this is people working together, and I really want to first and foremost thank those of you who provided drainage easements and worked with us to secure the land rights that were necessary to construct the system. And it's a big deal. This affects people's private property, and which for most of us is our biggest asset. And so we know these decisions aren't made lightly, and the cooperation, we've had very good cooperation and have been able to work with the various parties in a positive way and move this forward. So really want to thank everybody, and it's all about working together, because we're all connected. All right, somebody deal with this and get me some new batteries. Thanks, Chris. So, but before we launch in, now that Chris just got up, I want to introduce the team that's here, because we've got this doesn't happen for those that are shy and don't know and don't understand the risks that we're taking to do all of this work. And I want to introduce some of the key team members here. Chris Duza with Civil Tech Engineering. Chris' firm is the primary engineer, along with Remel Consulting on this corridor. But Chris has designed almost all of the prior post-Schultz mitigation, as well as the mitigation in the other corridors that we've done within the neighborhood. So, and the founder of Civil Tech is also with us tonight, Rick Schroeds, who has also been instrumental to this team through all the work. Want to introduce Sean Puyoma with the flood team. He's our program manager, been really critical. Shirley, step in so we can introduce Shirley. Is my right-hand person and keeps me on track. And we have Sean Golightly with the district as well, our community relations manager, and Lizzie Tagg. Lizzie's with Remel Engineering as well. And I think many of you have met she and Mark. Mark could not be with us. Mark Lamer could not be with us tonight. He had another commitment. And Mike Carley, who is the engineer for all the on-forest projects. And Courtney Maxwell, who's in the back there, is our business manager. She's helping Sean with managing all the financials, which we're now at. We've been fortunate to receive, we're at about $132 million in combined federal district funding, and the vast majority of that's federal, and a little bit state and a little bit district. So that's a lot to be managing for a very small team. Also with us tonight is Eli Resner with Rummel, and he is one of the principal engineers, as well as Lizzie and Mark on the in-neighborhood, we call it, flood mitigation. Alan Hayden with Natural Channel Design Engineering. You've all, and Mike, did I say you're with Natural Channel Design Engineering? They are the ones that manage all the on-forest work. And then Corey Helton with J. Fuller that conducts all the flood modeling and runs the no adverse impact analysis, which he will go through tonight. So just to reiterate something we talked about in prior meetings is that all of our projects have to meet these four criteria for feasibility. And, all of them pose their own challenges, but we've been really successful and so far really very successful. Feel very positive about moving forward now with the feasibility. Our view of this is that the district's offering a service and it's a partnership with you, and particularly those of you that have provided drainage easements or land rights so we can access your properties to construct these measures. And, it's, that's always a challenge, but our goal remains to have the flood mitigation done by the monsoon season this year. No guarantee on that. Weather's the biggest factor. Obviously, we don't control that. We hope, on one hand, I don't hope it remains dry because then we're going to have probably a really bad fire season. And on the other hand, I really hope it stays dry because we've got a construction team that we know will get a lot done, of which I should have also introduced Mike Garrison with Tiffany Construction. They'll be constructing storm drain pipe throughout the neighborhood, as well as doing all the on-forest work as well. And then I want to introduce Chris Garrison with D&G Development, and they're going to be constructing the detention basin. So, and we're going to walk through those details with you. So we need to continue to work together. Being adjacent to construction is not fun. But I will tell you, this will be, I guess, back to Schultz. Mike did all the work during Schultz except for one project. And then the projects, we've done projects so far in this less than 2 years, completed this flood mitigation in 7. We're just about complete with the 7th corridor, Peaceful Way. We completed Wupaki, Brandis, Copeland. Now within the next few weeks here, we'll complete Peaceful Way, and then certainly, and then we did work in the other corridors in the pipeline, and then also Schultz Creek on the west side of Flagstaff. So completed a lot of work. I've not had a single complaint, and in fact, every time I drive out there, people wave at me and tell me what a great job. I got a call. I got 2 calls already this week of people saying thank you, and how much they appreciate working with Tiffany Construction. And I had get called today, interestingly, on a reference from another community for they're looking at getting onto the job order contracting with. And I told the gentleman that I've gotten 0 complaints, and they care about people, they care about these projects, they do high quality work, and they manage their business extremely well. So we're very fortunate to have them as our construction partner. So these are the pieces we're going to go through tonight. As I mentioned, Alan will cover the on-forest measures. Off-forest, Eli will review. And then Corey will talk about the flood modeling, review that with you, and then go through the no adverse impact analysis results. So a little bit of background. I think all of you've seen this slide before probably, but you know, 22 was not a fun year. It was a really, really challenging summer with 45 major flood events, and your area was hit really hard. And, you know, ultimately, you know, we ended up spending a little over $9 million to address both the short-term mitigation and flood response. And you'll remember this chart because government tank corridor, the corridor we're talking about tonight, was the most heavily impacted. A big reason for that was that this corridor was very small element of this corridor was burned in Schultz, and but a lot of it was burned during the pipeline fire and burned very severely on very steep slopes. And Alan will talk about the watershed recovery, which frankly, as expected, is going very slowly. And you're all aware of that because you live, many of you were here. I recognize you from Schultz days. Keep trying to use that and that's not going to work. An important thing to remember is that in the 2022 rainfall events, that about the largest event we saw in any of the corridors was a 10-year. I think this corridor, there's two up there that, 2 or 3, and those were, you know, I think the largest was the event on July 23rd, the 5 to 10-year event. The potential for flooding is far greater, right? And so that's important to remember, and that even though we've had two dry monsoons, the last 2 years, I recently spoke with Brian Klimowski from the National Weather Service, and he said it's very interesting. They're already seeing indications of a more normal to robust monsoon this year. And I said, well, Brian, you know, thinking back, and I've been here 25, well, I think I'm up to 27 years now, that if I think back, very few times have we gone more than 2 years. We did post-museum fire. We went 2 years without a monsoon. I said, how many times? He said, you're absolutely correct. There's very few times we've gone more than 2 years. So I think I really feel in my bones we're going to have a real monsoon again this year. We've talked a lot over the years about the value of this integrated system, marrying up the watershed restoration on forest with the off forest flood mitigation measures. And that's proven to be, you know, continues to prove to be very successful. Was it last year or summer before, we had this about 3-inch event in the Wupaki Trails watershed, not over the entire watershed, but a good chunk of some of the more vulnerable area of that watershed. And those on-force measures performed extremely well. The mitigation within the neighborhood performed extremely well. I've never seen, frankly, bigger smiles on people's faces as they went outside to see what would happen, because they were all watching the gauges and knew that the watershed had experienced a big rainfall event. So that said, I think it's extremely important. Did that change? Yeah. To note that we cannot mitigate every rainfall event. And there will be rainfall events that exceed what we have designed for. And so all of you, as you look at these results and so forth, you're going to see that when Corey shows you the modeling, what happens in a 2-inch storm, what happens in a 3-inch storm. 2-inch storms, 25-year, 3-inch storms, 100-year. Much bigger storms than anything we've seen to date, but 25-year can and has happened here. And so know that this is important. This is taking a significant amount of that flow, what we call off the top. And the events that you saw in 22 would be mitigated, but events larger than that, there will continue to be flow. And You know, that's just the dynamic that we're in because of that 26 times increase in this corridor is particularly challenging to address. So we've completed in this corridor a significant amount. I know if you get our updates, you know this, that of the on-force work. Alan will show you some photographs and walk through what's been completed, but significant amount of work done on forest to date. The last two remaining components, very important components. One is from the transwestern, we call it transwestern fan, down to the neighborhood Forest Service boundary, is the restoration of that watershed through a technique called plug and spread, and Alan will describe that for you. As well as then, as you've heard prior, there's a large trench that will collect up that water coming off the forest and then put it into a transition channel that will go into this storm drain pipe. So, and the engineering for the other systems is all completed. We've gotten all of the land agreements. We do have 2 outstanding drainage easements, but I feel very confident that we'll be able to work through those very soon. And we're moving ahead. The board's approved the funding. NRCS is ready to go. We're all good with our funding. And you're going to see construction. Well, we're already constructing one component of this, but I'll leave that to the engineers to talk about. So next up will be Alan Hayden.
Thank you all. Thanks for coming out. Good to see some familiar faces. A little bit about what's going on up on the. Is this?
Yeah, you have to.
This is work. That better? Cool.
It's also for the recording. So we're recording this. So if you have neighbors that couldn't come, they can go online and view it there and download it if they want. And the presentation will be there too.
Great. Thanks. So we'll start out a little bit with what's actually going on up in the watershed. We're 2 years down the road from the fire. There has been some moderate, tiny bit of recovery on some slopes. We're seeing aspens coming in, some getting quite tall and dense in some places. And then on a lot of the watershed, it is still quite barren. The duff's gone, the tree canopy's gone, and the soils are still pretty tricky. What really has not recovered in the upper watershed are the channels. They are still in a pretty unstable condition, which means that it doesn't take a whole lot of rainfall to start caving in those sides and start entraining sediment to come down off those steep slopes and down into the neighborhoods. So if you'll remember, what we're after with the watershed restoration is to restore those watershed functions, kind of trim down the sediment transport up on the hillside so that it doesn't come down, so that all the work and the pipes and the channel and the crossings is able to carry the water and doesn't get clogged up by sediment and debris. So on the watershed, quite a bit of work has already been done. We've been working from the top down to get as close to the neighborhood as we can without changing the flow patterns until the pipes and the channels are in place to do that. So we've been working from the 420 down, and also the city of Flagstaff, as well as the Transwestern gas people, and we've been kind of monitoring what they're doing, coordinating with them, and they have kind of put grade control to keep their pipelines in place, which is great for the pipelines and all the infrastructure that's up high in the watershed. It's also great for us because it keeps those head cuts from coming down and supplying more sediment down below. So that has been done and was completed during the summer of 2024, both Transwestern gas line as well as the City of Flagstaff water pipeline coming out of the Inner Basin. Um, and then we have worked with Transwestern Gas to also restore a alluvial fan on top of their gas line. There, many of you know that gas line runs right up the drainage, and a portion of it, it was an alluvial fan. That got severely degraded. They had some plans for working on it that weren't really what we would like to see. We were able to convince them that we had a better way of going about it. And they actually even contributed a substantial financial amount towards that project.
Mhm.
So that fits right into the rest of the alluvial fan restoration up above, which the district has worked on from the 420 and the 556 road have both been stabilized so they don't come down and supply sediment. And then the channels below those have been worked on. And then we've worked on the upper alluvial fan restoration, and we've helped to clean out the government tank as part of our responsibilities to the Forest Service, since we're using a lot of their money. So all of that work has been complete. It's high in the watershed. It provides a lot of stability and slows down a lot of sediment coming down, but we still have work to do down next to the neighborhood. And that's what we're talking about coming up for the spring of 2025, where we're looking at the lower alluvial fan just above the neighborhoods, basically from from government tank down to the neighborhood line. That's an alluvial fan. That's naturally occurring alluvial fan. It's was there before, and it's actually worked pretty well, but it's starting to come undone. We've had more and more flows through it, so we're getting cuts through it, and we want to prevent that from getting any worse and make sure that it continues to work well into the future. Um, the terminal trench is what's used to gather up those flows and aim them towards the pipe. The transition channel gets them to the pipe, and then we'll talk about some berms way out in the forest on the east side of the highway, which helps to retain water and soak some of the excess discharge into the ground. So the layout of all this, you'll see the far over here, the 420 road is right here. All of this is channel restoration down for about the first 3/4 of a mile. And then that very large alluvial fan, and you'll see where the Transwestern pipeline crosses over the end of it. So a really large alluvial fan over a mile long. It's where there was a deeply entrenched channel. I think Mr. Garrison can tell you that once the bulldozer got in it, you really couldn't see the top of the bulldozer. So there's big changes that have occurred in the way the water flows up there and the way it's able to transport sediment down below. And then what we have coming up for down here is the project coming up for the spring of 2025, where we're working on small grade control structures to maintain these abraded channel systems, and then plug and spread down through here, and then our terminal trench right through here, and then the transition channel to the pipeline through here. So we can get into a little bit more detail what that looks like coming up. But the work on the forest above, this is what it looks like as we're working through. This is actually photos of the work on the 420 road and the grade control that went in up there, and the channel that's downstream of the 420 road running parallel to Eldon Springs Road. So that was a deeply entrenched channel with very unstable sides, and we're sloping it back and burying an awful lot of rock in there so it does not come apart anymore under big high flows. This is what some of that alluvial fan restoration looks like, looking downstream off of the Eldon Springs Road. You can see we've taken deeply entrenched channels, brought them up to the surface, spread those flows really wide. That's over 200 feet across that graded area right there. That spreads those flows out, gets them flow slower, gets them much shallower, and they lose their that flow loses its shear stress and its ability to carry sediment. So it starts dropping sediment out in this alluvial fan system. And as a matter of fact, these two photos on the right here are taken right after flows that we had this summer, right after the fans were installed. So it's already seen a minor amount of flow, and we've seen it start to do its work. This is some of the work on the Transwestern Channel. All of these alluvial fans have these large rock grade control systems buried in them. You've probably seen rock trucks going up and down the Eldon Springs Road all summer. That rock is buried in those alluvial fans so that they cannot cut any lower than they are now. So this is how all that works. And this is what's been put in. Now, let's go on to what's the upcoming spring construction season. This is a schematic of what we're planned for the forest just behind the neighborhood. You know, this is an area where naturally flows have come out and started to spread all over. Steeper above, this is a much shallower slope. Flows come down, start to deposit sediment, and then start to braid themselves out over a very wide area. And we want to maintain that. That is a natural watershed function. It gets rid of that last little bit of sediment, slows those flows down. But as you saw in the upper alluvial fan restoration photos, those are really deeply entrenched and took a lot of earth moving to bring those back up to the point where they could have that function. This is degraded, but it's not terribly degraded. And so we don't have to remove all that and bulldoze all of this up. This area hasn't been burned through. There's a lot of live trees. We realize it's the buffer between the neighborhood and the forest, and that a lot of people use it for recreation. We don't really want to mess that up. And so what we're planning for this is what we're calling a plug and spread alluvial fan system. And what we're doing is plugging the existing channels using rock sills to make sure that we spread the shear stress out across the remaining alluvial fan. And we do that where it's necessary to do it, and we do it amongst the trees. So we don't have to remove all the trees and have all of the bulldozer work. So we have designed and installed one of these over in Schultz Creek, right in where the trail system comes down to the Y there, that parking area. That's been installed since last June. It's actually seen quite a few flows, or June before last, and it saw the big heavy spring runoff that we saw previously, as well as the pipeline break out of the city water pipeline, and it's worked really well. It's collected sediment and fit into all the recreational traffic over there, and we've been able to maintain that. And that's what we're planning for this side over here. Once we get down to near the neighborhood, those flows would continue to spread out. As everybody that lives down there has seen, they just go everywhere because it's an alluvial fan system. At this point, we're collecting those flows in our terminal trench and berm system and feeding them into the transition channel, which connects into the pipe system that Eli's going to talk about in a few minutes. Okay.
So Alan, I think
yeah.
important point to make is that part of the reason that we do this work on the forest is to better manage those flows over the long term, because in a natural system, if we weren't intervening, right now it's migrating north is what's happening, and it might migrate north for 10 years and then 10 years migrate south again, and it might split. This will provide a lot more predictability for where that water's going to go, and we need that because we want the water to go to the system that we're constructing through the neighborhood, right? To be better mitigate. And so that piece of this is something to always keep in mind.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, yeah, water's going to be allowed to go really wide throughout all of this system, and then the berm and trench system collects it all up and makes sure that we're continually aiming it at the pipe system. So,
And those little lines, yeah, go back to the diagram, Alan. Show them the little plug and spreads, the berms and, or
yeah.
not the berms,
So
but
these are basically, a series of rock check dams of graded rock throughout all these channels here. But these areas right through here and here, these are plug and spread. So it's a big plug and then a buried rock sill on either side of it to make sure that water doesn't just go around it. And you have to do several of them through the whole thing to make sure that water doesn't just hit your plug, run around it, and eat it through. So this is the major activity. These are all kind of smaller structures because we have a lot of room to spread flows out through here. These are the more incised pieces through here and a little bit through here as well. So, and then everything gathers up. There's a berm through here that feeds this flow towards the terminal trench. This is the terminal trench. This picks it all up, stills it out, and then guides it through here. This terminal trench has a little bit of a slope on it, on the bottom of it, so that the fine sediment that gets into it doesn't just pile up and stay there, so it can continue to work for many years. And this is one of the things we've learned since the Schultz fire, is to make sure that the fine sediment can get out of that and get into the pipe once we have high velocities to make it work. So if all that makes sense. A little bit about what this looks like. This over here, this is terminal trench being built on Campbell, over in the Campbell drainage, just right next door, right over here. It's a big hole in the ground that continues all the way across the alluvial fan. There's grade control on the upstream side, built out of rock, so that doesn't head cut back up into the alluvial fan upstream of it. We don't want to create any more problems than we're trying to solve. Then you can see also here, we're looking out across the transition channel being formed. There's a weir setup that allows a certain amount of water to come out of there. If we exceed the amount that goes, the flow that's headed towards the pipe, that flow will come out, not be allowed down the channel by this weir structure, and then the whole thing's designed so that it goes back into the alluvial fan system above. But that's a very big flow at this point where we expect that to happen. A little bit about the plug and spread. You can see over here, this is the plug and spread that was built at Schultz Creek. And it's a little bit under snow, but I put this photo in because it has the water flowing on it. And you can see that it's stopping. We have a plug going across the creek, okay? And then water backs up behind that plug and then it has to move out to the side and spread across the rest of the valley. It eventually coalesces and starts to get back into the creek again, because that's the low point in the valley. And at that point, you build another plug and spread structure. And you keep doing that. These things fill up with sediment, and you end up over time with a big flat valley, just like an alluvial fan, and with all of the sediment stored at grade behind it. So this is that system at work in Schultz Creek, and you can see, we have about 800 feet of alluvial fan behind this, and you can see, we counted, there are nearly 900 trees here, and I think we had to move 6 of them to build these structures and make this thing work. So we're really kind of excited about this in areas that are not totally degraded. So this is what that looks like. Okay. Once the water comes off the mountain, we drop most of the sediment out on the mountain, and we guide it across the highway and beyond. It goes out into the cinders out on the east side of the highway. Those cinders are a really important asset to us. There's that, if that water was allowed to go, it'd keep on going to Doney Park, where it eventually just pools up in the depression out there. Those cinders, we're trying to guide water to the cinders and make sure that it goes as slow as possible and spends as much time on the cinder soils as possible so that it can seep in. Okay, that we've seen that work in the Cinder Lakes area. We've seen it work in this area. You can really kind of lose a lot of discharge going across these cinder soils. So in order to help that and kind of slow the flows down, there's a system of berms that kind of trap water and then let it go slowly around them. So those berms, the triplets, as you see in the bottom of the photo, those were built a couple years ago. We've seen a lot of flow through those already. The upper twin berms were built back in the days of Schultz and then added to in the last couple of years. They've been increased in length and height and strengthened so that they don't get overtopped with the very large flows that we're seeing now. And back in the Schultz days, these over just south of the landfill area, between the landfill and Upper Doney Park, there were berms built in the Schultz days. These were small, and they were basically just pushed up material. They never saw a whole bunch of use. They saw a little bit of use. And what we're doing with these now is we're rebuilding them. They're going to be taller, more extensive, and kind of give you an impression of how this looks. These are typical, but 8 feet tall. They're big berms out there. They're not made to capture water and retain it forever. They're supposed to detain it. It'll eventually go around, but we're slowing it down to give it time to percolate into those deep, deep cinder soils. And so that's what's going on out here. And a lot of the earthwork that's being done that Eli's going to be talking about is going to be transferred out to these lower twin berms when we build those. So,
Yeah, so we're reconstructing those, particularly the upper berms, and then expanding those lower berms. We built the lower berms, what, Mike, 2 years ago? Yeah, and but now with all the modeling and everything done, and fortunately we've got the funding to go in and make them taller and solidify them, and that frankly is why Doney Park didn't flood from the north. If people were here back in Schultz Day, you'll remember that all the water flowed to the north and flooded North Doney Park, right? There was 4 feet of water that stood in homes down there for a long time, for several, on and off for several years. The reason they didn't get any water in 22 is because of the upper twins, and so they are really fundamental to this whole system.
Yeah. So it's the scrubbing the sediment out is fundamental to keeping that soil system working and keeping the berms from requiring a whole bunch of maintenance. It's a lot of earthwork. There's a lot of disturbing soil. This is, our cooperation, coordination with the Forest Service and just service to the environment. Everything that we're touching gets seeds, gets mulch, gets a native seed mix. And that's been working really well for us in the past. These are photos from the museum fire, where we've used mulch to cover stuff, alluvial fan and rocks and a terminal trench system on the museum fire on the right. And then this on the left side, we've been using hydromulching when we're really close to infrastructure like pipes and culverts that we don't want this mulch to clog into. So, and both these systems have been working really well to promote native grass coming in and stabilizing the soils. So that's kind of an overview of where we sit today and where we're headed to for the spring construction for Government Tank. I'll be around. Mike and Duke are both here tonight, so if you have questions about any of this stuff, we're around to answer questions in the back, and I'm going to hand it over to the star of the show, Eli.
Thanks, Alan. You got it here. No worries. Hello, everyone. My name is Eli Reisner. I'm with Rimmel Consulting. I'll be going over the neighborhood flood mitigations that Rimmel Consulting designed. Yeah, let me get to the correct slide here. The neighborhood flood mitigations are located northeast of Flagstaff along Highway 89, just south of Hutchison Acres and Timberline areas. These mitigations are between the on-forest mitigations we just saw that Alan presented on, and generally consist of a very large storm drain and detention basin. The storm drain is a 300-foot long, 10-foot diameter storm drain that runs down Switchback, crosses Highway 89, then runs along the south side of the East Valley Baptist Church property just north of the APS solar field, and then outlets into the large detention basin. The detention basin has a volume capacity of 77 acre-feet for stormwater storage. The detention basin outlets onto the Forest Service to the north and through the Johnson Ranch Subdivision Z channel to the south. The design mitigates to the 10-year storm event, which is 1.6 inches of rainfall in 45 minutes. This is a high probability storm event that is more likely to be seen each year. These mitigation measures will help reduce the impacts to residents, Highway 89, and multiple private infrastructures in the area. Now to talk a little bit more about the storm drain. The storm drain, again, this is a large storm drain. It's 3,000 feet long and a 10-foot diameter storm drain that runs down Switchback here that you can see on the screen, crosses Highway 89, then again runs along the south side of the East Valley Baptist Church property just north of the APS solar field, and then outlets into the large detention basin. A large concrete inlet structure for the storm drain will be constructed at the West Forest Service boundary, and that can be seen here. So right there is your inlet structure. Switchback will have a few smaller inlets in a ditch along the north side of the road. At the end of the storm drain is a large concrete outlet structure where the storm drain outlets into the Tract A detention basin. And that's here on the far right-hand side of the screen that you can see here. And that is our detention basin there. During the design storm of 1.6 inches of rainfall in 45 minutes, the storm drain takes 1,900 CFS from the on-forest transition channel through the neighborhood and into the Tract A detention basin. The storm drain will be buried approximately 7 feet of cover over the top of the pipe under the Switchback roadway and through the neighborhood. The storm drain inlet will have safety measures consisting of a 6-foot chain link fence, handrail along the top concrete head wall and wing walls, and breakaway fencing at the channel inlet to prevent access into the inlet. The storm drain outlet will also have just safety measures, including handrail along the top of the concrete head wall and wing walls, and an outlet grate to prevent access into the outlet of the pipe. For where the storm drain crosses under Highway 89, this section of the storm drain will be installed by a large jack and bore tunneling operation. And that you can see on the screen here in the middle for the Highway 89 crossing where the storm drain crosses Highway 89 here. Large holes will be dug on both sides of Highway 89 for specialized equipment to push the large pipe under Highway 89 as the front end of the pipe is slowly tunneled out under a specialized shield attached to the top of the pipe. Not only is this jack and bore tunneling operation a huge operation, but is also a huge benefit to the project, as this operation is roughly half the cost compared to doing open trenching across Highway 89. And it also eliminates the traffic impacts on Highway 89. The test pits for the final geotechnical investigations for this jack and bore tunneling operation will be dug and refilled tomorrow, Friday, January 17th. Tiffany Construction is the selected contractor that will construct the storm drain portion of these projects, as Lucinda previously mentioned. Construction access will be off North Fork and Switchback, as well as off of Highway 89 along the south side of the East Valley Baptist Church property. The Coconino County Flood Control District will be maintaining these storm drain mitigations. Now to talk a little bit more about the Switchback roadway. The footprint for the Switchback Trail roadway and the proposed mitigation measures vary from 43 feet to 51 feet wide along Switchback. And that can be seen with this dimension up here. So that is the limits of these mitigation measures and the roadway on each side as you go down Switchback. And these, let's see, Switchback and will be constructed within Switchback's existing 60-foot wide access easement or ingress and egress easements. The roadway will be modified to help mitigate flows during larger storm events. The proposed roadway section is a 25-foot wide roadway with a single ditch on the north side of the roadway. The roadway will have a single cross slope with the south side of the road slightly higher than the north side. The intent is for the roadway surface to be returned to the pre-flood dirt road condition, which the material would be recommended by the contractor and approved by the engineer. Now to talk a little bit more about the detention basin. The detention basin maximizes the use of the 17-acre Tract A parcel to have a volume capacity of 77 acre-feet of stormwater storage. The majority of the flows out of the detention basin are metered through the open channel to the north onto the Forest Service, where it will be mitigated by the on-forest mitigation measures. So over here you can see that is the north outlet, and those flows will go around to the berms that Alan just showed us. The flows through the south outlet are metered through a box culvert and into the existing Johnson Ranch Z channel. These mitigation measures actually reduce the flows in the Z channel to be less than the model pre-pipeline fire flows. The Coconino County Flood Control District will be maintaining these mitigation measures with the exception of the Johnson Ranch Z channel. The Flood Control District will not be maintaining the Johnson Ranch Z channel mitigation measures. The east and south side of the detention basin will have a 4-strand barbed wire fence and T-post around the top perimeter. The thick green line along the west and north side of the detention basin that you can see here on this exhibit is to highlight the alignment of the proposed access corridor. This access corridor will only be accessible to local residents with no official parking area created for it. This access corridor will have equestrian fencing on both sides of the corridor as indicated in the detail shown here on the left. As shown in the detail on the right, the equestrian fencing will have no-climb horse fence and a metal pipe top rail for the safety of the horses and the riders in the area that would potentially use this access corridor. Again, this equestrian fencing will be along the west and north side of the detention basin, and the 4-strand barbed wire fence and T-post will line the east and south sides of the basin. And just backing up to this basin, just wanted to again point out that, like Lucinda did earlier, that PC Diversified is the contractor that will be constructing the basin. They will begin started construction on Monday, January 20th. And access for construction for this basin will be through the temporary Forest Service access road from the landfill road to the northeast corner of the basins. There are several specific safety measures intentionally added into the design of the neighborhood mitigation measures. At the large storm drain inlet and outlet, fencing, railing, access prevention, and signage will be installed. The storm drain manhole covers will be bolted down to prevent unwanted access into the storm drain. Fencing and signage was added to the top perimeter of the large detention basin to prevent access into the basin. Specific equestrian fencing will be added along the access corridor on the west and north side of the basin to prevent to protect horses and riders. Lastly, there will be inspections of the flood mitigation measures after major flood events and prior to the monsoon seasons. And with that, I will turn it over to Corey.
So I want to add that it was really important that we maintain the access to the forest for everyone in that area. So that will be a pathway that can be utilized only by non-motorized, only by equestrians and pedestrian. And, we'll still allow for that access. And I know there's a few of you here from Sweet Acres and Johnson Ranch as well, and I was party to the whole process that went on for the development permitting for Johnson Ranch. And I think go back a slide there, Corey, if you're a couple slides here. Do we get the there? That area where the detention basin is, and that was something that came up during that whole development process. I know some of you in this room were party to that, and you said this area was drainage post Schultz, and you were absolutely correct. And frankly, I'm grateful every day that that property was designated for open space and drainage, because if we didn't have this detention basin, none of this could happen. Zero. Couldn't do the storm drain, couldn't do the basin, couldn't do any of it. There would be virtually nothing we could do in this corridor. So that was a really key piece, and I really appreciate those in the Johnson Ranch HOA who voted to approve that. If you have questions about that, talk with their board. We were not a party to that process, but that was a process that went on within that HOA. And once again, I'm very grateful that there was support because, again, this wouldn't be happening otherwise. So, and along with the church, the pastors and his board and congregation have just been tremendously supportive of this effort. And again, if we didn't have access to that property, none of this would be happening either. So really appreciate this is what it takes a community. So.
Oh, thanks, Sean, for getting the pointer working. I was hoping I'd be able to figure out how to point my finger as good as Alan did. But so with all the work that we're doing, we want to make sure we're not adversely impacting any of the areas, parcels, properties. And so what I'm going to kind of define for you is what we're looking at. What we don't want to be increasing the depths we don't want to be increasing the velocities, and we wanted to define that criteria of what we're looking at. And that this criteria was used during the Schultz. It's used during the pipeline. So this is kind of what we're using as our NAI criteria to make sure that we're not negatively impacting and that we're only providing a benefit. So let me, our
And these criteria are set nationally through the Floodplain Managers Association. So, we're using the nationally accepted criteria.
So the water depth identifies areas, a tenth of a foot increase. So we're going to be looking at that for any of the storms that are in the 1 inch for 45 minutes interval. So 2 to 5 year recurrence interval. That's what we're looking at. We're also looking at, we don't want to increase anything by more than a half a foot. If it is a 2 inch storm or the 25-year event, a 25-year event has a 4% chance of probability of happening in any given year. We also don't want to raise anything more than a foot for something that has a 1% chance of happening, or the 3 inch event. Water velocity also is impactful. So anything over 3 feet per second has the capability of erosion. So we want to make anything that's greater than that, we want to start looking at that. And we don't want to see any increases greater than a foot or 10% the pre-project. So to describe our pre-project, what we're looking at is the 2022 LIDAR condition, our flow conditions post-fire. That is our pre-project that we're criteria threshold that we're looking at. So we're taking that 2022 LIDAR, that snapshot in time with the conditions of the watershed, what's produced with the rainfalls coming off the mountain. And then we're comparing that as our pre-project, and then anything that we have with our projects is our post-project.
And LIDAR is a technology. They fly over the area and they send down, laser points and it's extremely accurate for defining the topography. So after all the flooding in 22, we did the flight so that for the modeling, and this is used by the engineers to design as well, particularly on forest, we have pretty accurate understanding of what the topography is. So, and then they use that to do the modeling going forward. So.
And it might be worth mentioning too that 2022 snapshot, that's a different condition than it was pre-fire. So we had already had one season. We had a lot of incised channels,
right.
And that sort of thing.
All that impact.
So this is our 1 inch rainfall on the left. We have our 2022 condition of the watershed, what we would expect coming off the mountain. So here's Switchback, here's our solar, here's Tract A area, and then coming around to Landfill Road into Doney Park over here, or to the south, Landfill Road again here, and coming into Pioneer Valley. So with the 1 inch event, with everything that Alan and Eli have been talking about in place, this is kind of our result. So you can see for the 1 inch event, it's all contained within the pipe. So you got your terminal trench right in here. It's picking it up, putting it into the pipe down through here, and it's drying it out through here. And so when I say drying it out, that's drying it out from what the flows are coming from the mountain. You can still have local flow if you have if it's raining really hard right in here, but you wouldn't expect anything coming off the mountain. It would all go into the pipe, go into Tract A. Some of it would go to the south. Landfill Road here at the triplets, the top triplet here would contain all the water. It wouldn't get past the first triplet. The rest of the flow would be going to the north and being contained behind the berms, and it doesn't pass really the Landfill Road in the 1 inch event. So how does that look when you can look at the NAI criteria? So here's your plug and spreads. So you're changing some of the flow patterns up here. You're over a tenth of a foot difference are areas where in yellow, it goes into the terminal trench and you're increasing your depths in those areas through the terminal trench and in the channel into the pipe. Then it goes underground. And then your other areas that you're going to be increasing depth would be in tract A and then also into the forest. Into the cinders, and again, that's to allow for more infiltration. So for the 1 inch, that criteria that we laid out is all met. So let's go ahead, and this one is a 1.6. So this is what the pipe can hold, is approximately your 10-year event, which happens to be about 1.6 inches of rainfall. So an event that has a 10% chance of happening in any given year, you should be able to anticipate that goes into the pipe. So this is kind of what it would look pre-condition or 2022 condition of the watershed coming down. This is your light blues are a quarter of a foot to a half a foot. The little darker blues are a half a foot to a foot, and green is 1 to 2, and then up from there. So you got a lot of depth in coming off the mountain in your existing sort of condition. Once everything is constructed, you don't have any flow. It would all be going into the pipe and going into tract A. So that has your impact on switchback here, Hepple, the church. So again, you can have rainfall locally, but this is what we'd anticipate coming off the mountain would be all going into the pipe again. So let's go to the 2 inch. This is what you're existing on the left. And then your proposed. So anything above 1.6 inches is not necessarily going to make it into the pipe. You're going to start overtopping your terminal trench. So here's your terminal trench again, and you're going to start overtopping and going in. So this is where the criteria you want to make sure how that overtops and how it's spreading is not any worse than it was in November of 2022. And so that is what we're looking at. To the south, we're picking up flow in the tract A. To the south, flows are going. It's going through the first berm, the second berm, and the third berm. It's being contained at that point. So Pioneer Valley would not be seeing any flow up through the 2 inch event coming to the south. And then also to the north where we have flows going. And this area is about 40 acres. And so you got the berms also, but then you're also allowing some flows to get into the 40 acres here for more infiltration. And so and then there's some other area off to the side here, which is about another 40 acres. So you got anywhere between 80 to 100 acres that we're allowing infiltration of the flows and depths, flows to infiltrate before they go into Doney Park.
And behind the berms too.
And behind the berms, correct. Yeah, so and Alan had talked about that. So you got the berms and you're allowing the flows to go around, allowing them to set here, infiltrate, slowly go around, and then infiltrate. And then this area also is another area of infiltration that's not behind the berms. So how's that look from an NAI perspective? So the oranges and the reds are, yellows and the reds are half a foot and then over a foot. That's our NAI criteria. So this is, again, it's all within the areas that we would anticipate, behind the berms, in the terminal trenches, but it's not on the parcels. 3 inch. So it's a lot of flow here, still some flow. You're still going to have flow, but it's not as much. And at this point, going to the south, flow would be making it into Pioneer Valley, as well as going around on the north side into Doney Park it would also be have the potential of making it around. So it has a lot of infiltration, and in both events, what's making it down to Doney Park is less. Your discharges, your peak discharges are less, your volumes are less, and your depths are less. So all those criteria are less coming into Doney Park with these modifications and constructions that are being proposed. And then how does that look from an NAI perspective? So the areas in the red are areas where it's exceeding the NAI criteria. And again, that's all within road corridors. So like right through here, you can pick out some red through here. That's along the switchback road corridor. And then all the other berms and terminal trenches that we have seen in the previous slides. And with that, that's the NI criteria. And that's it.
Thank you all. I think one piece here to understand is, I don't know if this is going to work. Yeah. We're at outlets from the detention basin. There'll be work here. This is on Forest to guide this water out to the berms. Right now, you can see from the erosion, well, not erosion, this is sediment deposit, that, and if you look back at the flows, this area is very vulnerable. Obviously, this area is very vulnerable. Those are the two areas where are benefiting, but this little piece here is to help guide. There'll be like a swale that will take the water out so it can go into this area and spread out, soak in, and into the berms. So I just wanted to point that out. All right, timeline. So the berms on the east side by the landfill started construction Wednesday. We got approval Tuesday, and they're starting to work on those berms already. Those are the landfill berm, or east side berms, we'll call them. The basin is slated to start this next week. So maybe Monday, maybe a little later, but in that time frame. One of the things this year, both on Forest and within the basin, is that with the expected fire danger this year, it's likely that the areas where they will be operating equipment, particularly on Forest, we have to, part of our agreement with the Forest Service is if there's any fire danger, we have to take that down to mineral ground so that there isn't that threat. And I've talked to Chris and Phil about that as well, that we're going to need to do that on that property too, so there isn't a threat of starting a fire. We'll see how that all plays out. Mike's worked through lots of years with fire restrictions and done a tremendous job in managing that. There's very specific requirements set by the Forest Service to allow us to continue construction, and getting down to mineral soil is one of those, and important. The lower fan on the west side of the development that Alan discussed, that lower fan, that plug and spread area, that's going to start in early to mid-February. And then the storm drain pipe is slated to start probably late March, early April. And the last component will be the crossing. And that right now is expected to start sometime in April. Some of this could shift in terms of the processes. We had an excellent meeting with ADOT on the crossing last Friday. They're comfortable with the approach we're taking. We've been working with them on it. We have to obviously secure an encroachment permit and expect that to move forward pretty readily now that we've all come to the utilization of this boring process for the roadway, which actually was their idea. And then the goal again is to have the system completed by July 1st before the monsoon season. And that obviously can be affected by weather, materials, other construction factors. But to date, Mike's completed everything before the monsoon. And I'll tell you, when we had Wupaki Trails, we actually literally finished it on Tuesday, and that Sunday was when we had the 3-inch rainfall event. And fortunately, it was all done and worked like it completely like it was supposed to. So, we can't guarantee anything, but that's the goal and that's the plan. And if anybody can pull it off, he can. So, yeah, some test pits again. Eli mentioned that, but to reiterate that, there'll be test pits on each side of the highway. We have to do some additional soil testing, so they're going to go down to where the pipe would be actually sitting. And then those will be filled in tomorrow. So they won't be sitting there open for any extended period of time, and they'll be on site the entire time they're open. So that's the other thing you'll see about Tiffany is they will employ a lot of key safety measures to make sure people don't have access to these areas. But also work with you. And those of you that live on Switchback, and it's disruptive, but they will really work with you as well as they can, and really strongly encourage you to sign in and give us your email, your email address, because we will literally be sending out, as they start, and if things are shifting or whatever, and they're going to shift the traffic to this side or that side. And I want to thank several of you I know that are here, agreed to larger temporary construction areas on your properties, particularly over in the Switchback area, so that we can stage the equipment and material much more quickly. And they will use that very effectively to keep that moving. So far, they've completed the projects earlier and under cost. So, they'll hope to do that again here too. But it's a little challenging there, but some of you have really worked with us to provide for an alternate access for construction, and that's into that Switchback area. That's really critical to getting through this as quickly as we can. So let's see, is it going to advance? No, these guys are just finicky tonight. I don't know if it's too cold for them or what the deal is, but it does not want to advance. And if you have any questions, during construction, call the flood control district number, or better yet, email us, because there's several of us, Sean and I and a couple other people, get these emails. Email us. So write this down or take it's on your presentation copy. If you have questions, if you have concerns, you will see Mike and his I'll say deputy superintendents. They will be out there all the time, and they'll be out talking to you a lot. They communicate very effectively with the community, and wave them down if you have a question, you have a concern, you have a specific need, you got to get some horses out on a certain day or whatever. They will work with you. Again, I haven't gotten one single complaint. In fact, I've gotten a lot of compliments. And then all these material, the presentation, the video of tonight's meeting will be on that website. If you have neighbors that weren't able to join us, direct them to that, and they can go in and get the material and so forth. So now we'll move to general questions. If you have specific questions to your property, what we'll do is when we break, there's plans over on here, and the engineers will talk with you specifically about your property. If you have specific questions, work with them. Or if you have questions, there's also the plans for the on-forest work as well. If you have questions about that, please see them. I think most of you have had a lot of communication with Lizzie and Mark over the last couple of years, but But that if you continue to have questions, let us know, work with them. But if there are general questions about the project, then we'll do our best to try to answer those. Now, we need you to ask the question into the microphone. So this gentleman up here has a question so that we get it recorded so people that view it later can hear it.
So what about the existing drainage that runs through my property next door? Are you guys
Next
gonna
door
strict-
here.
Yeah, it's right there. Where the
Uh-huh.
drainage under 89 comes through and floods the 6 properties along Timberline Trail.
We're not
Trailway
going to,
Trail.
you know,
Right.
because the important piece to this is we're pulling off that 1900, 2000 CFS right off the top. So that is the big impact that's going to happen is that project.
So there's not gonna be any mitigation to fill in the 6-foot trench in my backyard?
No, we're limited to long-term area-wide mitigation efforts. We don't have any funding to go on to private properties. I mean, there may be, one of the things we've done in the other corridors is that if in construction, Tiffany has excess material, right, Mike, you'll be able to make some of that material available to you. And we have a process where the engineers take a look at what your plans are, that you could take that material and utilize it. And they would walk through with you the requirements for all that. But we can make that material available because it frankly lowers the cost of the project. I can't do work on your private property
understand
unless
that.
it's in support, and that's considered illegal. It's a gift, a personal gift. So I can only do work for the overarching system on private property. So,
Okay.
and yeah, it's a, funding dynamic and everything as well, but that is the requirements. So, but we'll work with you, if we can get you some material and that type of thing. So, yeah, we just can't do it all.
I understand.
I wish we could.
But that's not a good answer either.
Yeah, I wish we could do more. But
Doesn't get rid of the 8 to 12 inches of sediment I have in my backyard of my back. 1 acre of my property is inaccessible because of the trench.
yeah, we've had it that's all over this area. There are those issues, and unfortunately, we just don't have the resources nor the legal capacity to do that. So that's just one of the limitations. Doing the best we can. Yeah, Chris.
If we could specifically take a look at your property on the maps, and if you could, get with one of the engineers, when we're done here, let's talk about
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
they'll look at it with you and try to help you look at what to do. And we have a lot of material from various places. Other general questions? Yeah, right in the back here.
This question is, as a neighborhood.
Whoop, just a second, you got to have the microphone.
As a neighborhood, when they start working at the forest end, I understand they're going to be working from the other end as well, but accessing all our properties as they run down the road, how will that work?
Part of it, you're gonna be hearing quite a bit from my staff. As this moves through, we've got it set up with some of you guys that are really helping us out with giving us some permission to use some property. So as we work by your house, there'll be days that you head to the east, and there'll be days that you head to the west. You'll go up through the Forest Service and back down Heppel and coming out that way. So what you'll find out is with my foreman, my PEs, every day somebody's going to be out and they're going to let you know when you leave tomorrow, when you come home, this is where we're going to be. I need you to go this way. They'll explain to you every process of the way what you're expecting to see. So there'll be no surprises for you. What you're going to probably find out is we're going to over communicate with you. You're going to probably get tired of talking to us half the time, but we've found out that the more that you know, it's easier for you to flow in and out. There's no surprises. You're not gonna come home at 6 o'clock at night and trying to figure out how to get to your house, because we're gonna let you know the day before how everything is progressing and how to get you there. So, again, we'll be giving you out our phone numbers. We'll be doing 3-week look ahead schedules, and again, it's everyday conversations. The things that we worry about is your mail, your trash. So all of those will be taken care of as we come through. There's a lot of stuff that keeps these things moving smoothly and you happy. And like I said, Ms. Lucinda was saying, through all the other corridors we've done, we've just met whatever the neighborhood's needs are, and every one of them are different. Your needs are different. You might come to me one day, say, hey, Mike, I've got to get a horse trailer out. I've got a problem. We'll figure out how to make that happen. So you're not out here. You're not stuck. You're not by yourself. You'll find out that we at Tiffany, we really truly care about you. We come into this as if this was happening in our front yards, and we do the best that we can to take care of you. So
And that isn't just talk, they do it.
This is probably a question more for the engineers
Sure.
messing with the plug and spread system.
Yep.
What's the anticipated timeline of the plug and spread system to be filled? And I just want to know so I could tell my kids, like, hey, in 10 years, in 20 years, the alluvial fan may shift and it may be different. So what's kind of the, do you kind of have that idea of what that could be?
I have an idea. I don't have a guarantee. So the plugs are not that tall. You know, they're only about 5 or 6 feet tall, and the area behind them is not a big hole to fill up. What we've seen on Schultz is that even after the snowmelt runoff last year, those plugs are about half full already, and that was, extraordinary runoff after snowmelt last year, and we've had a couple of smaller storms. If there's a big storm, they'll fill up probably in one storm system. If you're really going to see 2,000 CFS come down in that 2-inch, if we have that 2-inch in 45-minute storm, it will probably fill that plug and spread and smooth it out. You'll have fine sediment spread across the entire fan system in one storm system. During normal, low runoff systems, it's moving sediment already, and you'll probably see them about half full in a couple of years. But if you have the big storm, I would expect those to fill up really quickly. So.
And when we have bigger events, and then usually intermittently through the season, even if we don't, and then certainly postseason pre-monsoon, Alan and his team go out and do inspections of all these areas to see, is there maintenance needed or not, particularly after the big events. Is there maintenance needed? Frankly, the on-force measures have required very little maintenance other than the post-pipeline fire and the 1,000-year rainfall event that we had in Brandis. They've been virtually maintenance-free, as has been the storm drain systems. The 2 storm drain systems that we put in post-Schultz and paintbrush area, we've had those inspected several times. They are, in great shape. They're performing well. So.
Yeah, and I just add that we want that aggradation.
Yeah.
We want to see that over the entire fan. That means it's working, it's doing what it's supposed to do, and we've reactivated that fan instead of transferring sediment downstream in the gullies. So we want to see that happen. We want to see it happen over the entire fan. So we're not, once those things fill up, the fan is working as it should. And that's not a maintenance item for us. Things are good. So does that make sense?
Yeah,
Great.
and just one more thing, to that as you reactivate the fan and the fan starts functioning again as an alluvial fan, we do have the terminal trench, you know, and the berm at the bottom of the fan above the neighborhoods so that as those flow patterns naturally migrate, you know, shallow flow patterns across the fan, they'll still get collected in that terminal trench and directed back to the storm drain. So the goal is for them not to migrate and enter the
Wildly.
neighborhood in different places through time, but always go to that storm drain inlet.
And we've actually had to do very little tinkering with that so far in the system. It's been pretty remarkable. Other questions and other general questions that anyone has? Well, thank you very much. Again, I really thank those of you that have worked directly with us to move this forward. We're really excited to get this moving and get these projects into the ground. And yes, sure.
When you when you start going across 89 with the jack and pump system, because I live on the north side, is the highway going to be divided, or is it going to be weird where you can just,
No, that's the beauty of
yeah,
the boring is that we don't expect to have any traffic control whatsoever. I
Okay.
mean, there may be intermittent times of, material being transported out onto the highway to go for deposit. The material, actually, a lot of it will probably go out the other direction. The landfill is looking for more cover. They're gonna, and so some of the material will be going there. Some of the material up front goes to the berms to help reconstruct these berms. And then we have a pit that we use in partnership with the Forest Service. It's called Hill Pit up on the grade, where we take any of the excess spoils. So, but the lion's share is going to go to the berms and to the landfill. So that's good. That means the transport, will be going out through the forest largely by the berms. Good question. Any other questions anybody has? All right. Well, thank you again. Please, again, if you have individual questions or questions about a particular location or area, come over and meet with the engineers. We're here until your questions are answered. Thank you so much.